you just pop in.
I
Hello.
know. Like it doesn't matter how many times we've done this. Every time I hear like the little theme, I get fired up.
Yeah, a little bit of dancing, and all of a sudden we're on, right? So hopefully
Yes.
you're not in an awkward pose.
Yes.
Tanya, I'm so excited to continue our conversation from last week on imposter syndrome.
Me too. Because you had this brilliant idea to bring out like a whole new perspective. So I would also want to say everyone who's listening, like get ready because Ari's just like is going to blow it away, and we're gonna talk about stuff that's very real, and it's like it's still very much happening. And so hi to all the Limitless family and the Limitless group.
Hi. And also, we're sad to miss Lane. Lane is usually here with us, and he just sent us a message that he's not here. So hopefully, hello when you listen to the recording. So we love our Limitless family when they come listen. But we are on this topic of imposter syndrome. And last time when we met, we talked about the leading ourselves through imposter syndrome, what it felt like to have those negative thoughts, or we called cucarachas, like how do we deal with that? How
Mm-hmm.
do we when are these thoughts triggered, and then how do we behave from there? So that's where we started last time, and then we thought about where we wanted to go with the conversation, and we thought about, what are the environments that sometimes trigger imposter syndrome in us.
Mm-hmm.
So we can start there. It's like, what about environments have triggered imposter syndrome? And I would love, um, because you work in such male dominated fields, I want to hear story. I love stories. So I want to hear stories.
So
So
I have stories. I know you do too. So we'll be sharing a bunch of those. And when you said cucarachas, cucarachas also grow in certain environments, right? When there's trash, when things are like dirty, then it's more likely for the cucarachas to come up. And the same is with syndrome. When you're in an environment that makes you feel like you don't belong, where the constant messages are like you are different from everyone else, where like everything around you, not just everyone, but everything around you is set up for you not to succeed, then imposter syndrome. I think it's even crazy to call it a syndrome. Yeah, I would say it's imposter symptom because it's a symptom of the environment around us. Um, so, I mean, the first story I think happened when I was 14 years old. And even though I've never been very athletic, I used to like to playing soccer. But back then, there weren't any women, like, there weren't women's teams. This was like 20 years ago. So if a girl wanted to play, you kind of had to play with the boys. And so I remember one time I was just kind of hanging there on the field, and I had my goalkeeper's gloves on. I was 14 years old, and this 11-year-old boy comes, and he comes and he's like, "What are you doing here? You should go play with your dolls." And I mean, I ended up kind of challenging the kid, and I ended up like being a part of that team, ironically. But I was like, I've always in sports, that's a constant thing. It's like sports is a man's world, and now um, there's more input on women. Change is slowly getting towards making it more inclusive. But I can even think of me last a couple years ago with the Dodgers, where I wasn't just like the only woman often traveling with the team. I was the only Latina, and it felt so lonely. And that year made me second guess everything about me, made me doubt myself in ways I had never done it, made me question what I was saying, what I was doing. And it was hard because it also made me make a lot of mistakes that I generally wouldn't do. But when you're overthinking and second guessing yourself at every step of the way, you are bound to make mistakes. And so that was an environment that was telling me you're an imposter because people like you don't have a space in a place like this.
That's so well said. People like you don't have a space in a place like this. And it might not be overtly said,
Mm-hmm.
but there's little things that you feel left out of, or jokes that you don't understand, or um, things that you may, nuances that you don't understand, and no one's letting you in on those jokes.
Yeah.
Um, and the way of doing things is very different. So, imposter phenomenon started with women feeling like they were being left out of the academic world, and they were very
Okay.
high performers. And so I think the conversation is around imposter syndrome for women. I just wanted to give like this 360 view, but it does happen. And we talked about this in the pre sort of preparation, is whenever you are like a minority group in a majority group, whether it's a Latina in a American dominated group, whether it's being Chinese in a Caucasian group, whether it's being a female in a very male dominated field, you can feel these symptoms come up, these things of doubting yourself. And I love that story. Like, I'm doubting myself. And I'm kind of second guessing myself. It sort of like feeds into itself, right? Because you kind of
Right.
don't feel super confident. And then you kind of put something out there and you can't take risks. That's the important thing, is like you don't feel comfortable or confident enough to take risks, to speak up, to speak out. So you become sort of this other person. So it's
Yeah.
not just imposter, like you almost become, here's this person that's there, and then I'm over here as a protective mechanism in a group because they haven't included you, or you haven't felt included. So I just wanted to like put that bow on it. And that's what I'm hearing from your story too.
Yeah, and it almost it becomes like a self fulfilling prophecy, where like because you're making these mistakes and you're doubting yourself, you're almost
Mm.
proving to yourself and everyone around you that you actually don't belong there. And so that's one of my stories. I know that you have one too.
Yeah. So thanks for teaming me up for that. When I worked in fencing, sports commentary. So commentary and sports commentary, thank goodness for all those awesome female tennis commentators, but it is a very male. So as you said, men are in sports. So for me, I was the first female, first American to step into that role. And there were so many things about it that didn't make me feel like I fit in.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of it was there's some disorganization. There wasn't clear processes. I didn't know who to talk to. I didn't understand what was going on. And also, one of the biggest things was, and I remember this, is that they would just say, oh, well, everybody else just drops everything to go to, let's say, Dubai next week in order to do the commentary. And I go, look, I'm really sorry, but I have two kids at home. And it's not just that I'm a female, but whoever's the caretaker, I'm the caretaker at home. I can't just drop everything. But then they looked at me as if, like, with like I had three eyes in my face. Like, how can you choose the family? Because everyone else didn't have children that were taken care of, or they had
Mm-hmm.
older children. So the paradigm or the system was built, and the process was built around a certain person. It was built around a male, not always the caretaker of the child, not always taking consideration everybody's needs. And so that was the paradigm. And it wasn't that there was willingness to shift. And there were some requests that I had of, maybe we can make it a little bit easier for all of us, divide it in a certain way, make it more even, make it more fair. But in the end, it didn't actually work out that way. So I had to go. And so I think one of the things when I talk to leaders about how can I be more inclusive is look
Right.
at sort of these unsaid rules that are there that are actually keeping and preventing really top level people. And people love the commentary, not to toot my horn, or this is a sort of, I think Hannah talks about bragging, right? Like doing a good humble brag. But basically, I was good at it, but I couldn't continue because what was success wasn't something I could do. But instead of working with me on it, there was no transparency, no organization, no process. And so it just left me to say, all right, this isn't for me anymore. And so I think, again, this is so important for leaders to know, is just double check your assumptions about people, double check, do I have a process that only works for the white male in the office? Do I have, is my paradigms of success only what this person does? Like, for example, I'll give one more. If I feel, so I have a lot of people go, well, this woman isn't displaying confidence in my group. And I said, what does that mean? What does displaying confidence in your group mean? Well, I want her to really take this presentation, speak up, do these things, do it like this. And I'm like, well, have you asked her, who's actually not an American woman, ask her what she feels is confidence and what she thinks is displaying confidence, because I do think it might be not the same. So that's the thing, is you have to check your biases. Is confidence looking like Bob, or does confidence look like Bob and Tanya?
I love that. Thank you for sharing both of those stories. And I want to bring out what Mary Carmen is saying in the chat, because I think this is why kind of we're addressing. And it's, if you are a leader in an organization, if you want your team to perform, if you want to have the best people doing the best work, then you need to be aware of these things and how you are preventing the people that come from minorities from doing that and like bringing your entire team up. And so something that you said, and like looking at Bob and Tanya, is what we were talking about, how like even though sports is still very like men dominated, and that's like the standard, a few of the women's soccer team in the US have discovered that they don't have to compare themselves to the men's team, to the MLS, that they can have their own market, their own way of doing marketing, their own way of doing things. And like now they're expanding, and then they're measuring themselves to themselves, like to their own standard. And so that way they're not falling, not only they're not falling short, they're like exceeding expectations and expanding the way we see the sport.
I love that. So they're building a separate paradigm of what success can look like. It can look like this, and we can do it collaboratively, and we can do it differently. It's not bad or good. It's not better or worse. It's just that there's another standard, or there's more room for more people to be successful, not just one type of person or one person. So what we're really talking about is imposter syndrome and DEI work, right? Like being inclusive, having a sense of belonging. I just wanted to bring up another example too. This happens as well. And I just want people to understand that by not being inclusive, by not being a leader who tries to be inclusive of other people and other ideas, what happens is we miss out on a Tanya, on an Iris, on a Bob in an all-female group, right? So like we miss out on different ideas, opinions, and innovations. And one of the examples I have is what I see in my healthcare clients. So I know we have a lot of corporate people, but what happens is, this is such a good kind of like example, is a lot of times a chief of the organization is a male, and a female will often look at him and say, well, he doesn't do the load at work at home. He has a assistant, and he has this and he has that, and he's not doing all the stuff at home, and he doesn't hold all the kids and take them here and there. How am I supposed to see that example? Right. So also be aware that as a leader, and what are the leaders and what are the examples they're setting? Right. So if I see the chief and they don't work like me, they don't act like me, they're not like me, it's really hard for me to ever believe that I'll be there. So a lot of really great people could be really good leaders, but they don't want to do it because they don't see themselves in that leadership. And I think you have a really good example of, I think you were talking about this too, is if we don't have examples, it can be really, really hard for a person who is very qualified to see themselves in that position.
Yeah, I think again, when we're talking about the problem, we're also thinking about what are some of the potential solutions. And so this is something that's been talked about over and over, and it's like having different kinds of role models, having different like options for mentorship. And so if within your organization you may not have like all of the diversity that you could have, maybe like bring someone in to give a talk, bring someone from the outside so that everyone who's part of your group can see like, well, here's another example of leadership, or here's another example of someone succeeding that doesn't look maybe like the stereotypes of everyone around them, but they are there. And so this is where, representation is super important, and also highlighting the people that are getting there, and like giving them that, more than like highlighting it, because I see a lot of like places that do it and like they post it on social media, but I'm like, no, doing it internally, like talk to
Mm-hmm.
the interns that are coming in and point them to this person. They're like, maybe she's not in your area, but she's here, so you can be too. And so it's also about like looking within the organization, who are people that have positions of power, that have advanced, and like point to them, to maybe the people that are new. So I think that's like a great way of enhancing it.
Yeah, I think it's really important, right? So internally doing it not just as a let's put it on Slack and give people kudos, but
Mhm.
more it has to be a daily effort. It has to be a conscious effort. Can I ask you out of curiosity, as someone who has worked in such a male-dominated field, how have you, um, I would say, been resilient in those fields, not having enough examples or being the first Latina or being the first woman in that group? I mean, you're probably a lot of those.
Yeah.
So,
Um, I think I always saw it as a challenge. And so, like, the more someone told me, like, it isn't for you because you're a woman, or it isn't for you because you're Mexican, I was like, well, I'm going to prove you wrong. Or I wasn't even thinking I'm going to prove you wrong. I'm like, the more you tell me no, the more I want to do it. Um, which I think is part of my rebellious nature. And like, my mom hates it, obviously, because so so I think there's a part of it where that resilience was built into me, and I kind of loved just doing the opposite of what people told me I could do. Um, and but I think in those times where it's funny, but the only time I have felt like I didn't was a couple years ago, when I've already had like 15 years of experience in the field, and I felt like maybe I'm not that good, maybe I don't belong here. And I think when you get there, is something that we talked about last time, is having a support system. Thank God, like I had people to talk to, and I had found women in other organizations that had maybe shared their experience with me, that it was similar, and or just that said like, hey, I'm here for you. um and so I think that's the number one, is kind of having a support system. And the other one is going back to the framework that we wanted to introduce, and is self-determination. And it's one of the things that that theory says is like, look back at your past successes, look back at like the things that you've done, and that you've been successful at. And so like right now, sometimes when I'm doubting myself and I'm working on my website, what I do is I'll go back to the comments I get from my workshops and from my individual sessions after the process is done, and I'm like, yes. Like, mind, you're telling me one thing, but they like what people are saying is very different.
yeah, so two things is remind yourself you're a badass. And then also have other people remind you you're a badass, the ones who
Mhm.
know you. And the other thing too is this is such an advocacy for recognizing your wins, right? So that's what's so hard about imposter syndrome sometimes. And one of the things that I've been personally working on is recognizing the small wins. It helps with resilience. It helps with resilience in these types of situations. And I think one of the things we don't feel safety in is saying, you know what? Yeah, you are doing you're doing great and you're a badass. So I think it is a practice. So I love that you brought it up. And as part of self-determination theory is all these theories, and there's a lot of science behind it. You have to recognize when
Hmm.
you're doing the things that you
Right.
want to be doing, that you are risking out there.
Yes, absolutely. And I think it's not just like noticing, it's tracking them, like making sure you're you have evidence of them, like you're writing it down, or you're like uh, yeah, tracking them. I think is the best way to explain it. And one of the things we keep saying in Limitless Minds, which I firmly believe, is success leaves clues, but you can only find the clues if you're like actively living there. And so it's like if you have a treasure map and it's just hanging on the wall, then it's a painting because you're not looking for a treasure, right? It's just like a piece of there with an X that probably looks ugly. But if and there's a treasure there to be found, but you're not like looking for it. And I think we need to leave those clues, and we need to track those successes for when we need them, for when we're feeling lost, for when we're feeling like we can't do it. That's what you go back to.
I love the treasure map piece. I'm gonna every time we have a conversation, I try to think about it, and then I quote you like success leaves clues, but it's a treasure map. If we don't look at it and we don't use it, if we don't recognize it, then we're gonna get lost, and it's just a painting on the wall, an ugly painting on the wall. I love it. So it's so good. So the last, I know we have. I also wanted to talk about if you're a leader and you really want to be a leader who helps people belong. I wanted to ask you if you can remember a leader that has helped you feel that way. And what did they do to help you feel like you were part of the group?
Ooh. I'm gonna think about it, and while I do, you might have a story like fresh. So go ahead and tell yours while I'm like listening to you and also seeing like what comes to my head.
So I don't have stories per se, but I think about it as myself as a leader, and I think about like what do I need in order to thrive in an environment? I need to feel like I can make a mistake and then my leader has my back,
Hmm.
right? Like let's laugh about it. Let's talk about it. I feel that at Limitless Minds, I get great feedback from my group here, from Josh.
Hmm.
So I need to be able to say, this is hard for me, but I'm going to do it anyways. And please help me with some feedback and help me with support. So I'm also able to ask for what I need. I don't feel like, so one of the things of being feeling imposter syndrome is you feel like you always have to perform, or at least I do. I feel like I have to be perfect and I have to perform in order for me to belong. And it's an environment that allows not that perfection, but like sees like, man, you really grew there. And oh, that was uncomfortable, but you did that. Right. So that is pointing out not my perfection
Hmm.
or my organization, but it's really saying like, wow, it was amazing that you risked that, you did that, and it looks so good, it was great, and you're still growing, and I see you. So anytime I feel seen and heard in that way, and also I do like an environment where, and I there is two-way feedback, right? So ask me if you're having trouble figuring out how to incentivize me or to push me or drive me, like ask me, right?
Yeah.
So ask me if you're like, hey, give me some feedback. So I like that as well. But I will often give it anyways. I think I reached an age where I'm just like, I'm gonna just tell people what I need. So
Yeah. And I think the second part of it is the people actually listening, right?
mhm.
Because there's nothing more demotivated than having a boss that is asking you to like give him feedback back, or to like they're like, yeah, tell me what you need, and then you tell them and they're like not listening and not being receptive, and like you're like, you know what, you shouldn't have even asked.
Exactly. Exactly. But the listening, so the thing about belonging is there's a lot of vulnerability on both sides, right? So a leader can
Absolutely.
say, I really want to help you here, but I can't. I'm not empowered to do that. And I'm sorry. And sometimes we have to be vulnerable as a leader in that way to say, like, I don't have all the power and authority to help you with this promotion, but I
Hmm.
can help you grow and get better. So I think it takes a ton of personal work on a leader's part to feel vulnerable in conversations to help with that. Because once you're vulnerable, the other person can also be vulnerable, and you guys can have this um, great relationship back and forth.
Yeah, I see. Now you saying that made me think of one of the two stories or two great leaders. And one said to me, I don't know how to guide you because I've never had a woman working under me, and I can see that your experience is different. Because he gave me like terrible feedback, and I was like, what do you want me to do with this? Like, and so he was like, I don't know. So let's figure it out together. And the fact that he said that, and it was like a joint effort and a partnership in making it work. And so that was Paddy Steinford with the Blue Jays, and the other one is actually Josh, because when we had to do the videos, I was struggling so much. English is not my first language. Perfectionism is like kind of like with you, like right there. And when had to record all the videos, I just kept like messing up and like fumbling in words. And he was like, you know what, just do it in Spanish. He's like, we'll have some people in the app that probably speak Spanish anyways, and we want to make it as diverse as possible, so go ahead and do it.
Yeah.
That was huge.
Yeah. Yes. So he's allowing you to be yourself, and that is so it's amazing. We should give gratitude and a shout out to Josh
Yes.
after this, because I don't think he is here today, but we will. But it does take that vulnerability and that skill set as a leader to really say, and I want to leave with this one is you can, as a leader, being a leader doesn't mean you know everything. It doesn't
Hmm.
mean you know all the answers. Actually, it means the opposite. You're doing the best you can with the information you have. There's nothing more, there's nothing less. And
Hmm.
so just going to you and saying, hey, I've never led a female before. However, and there's accountability there too. There isn't just telling you, I don't know how to do it, and we're just moving on from there. It's, I don't know how to do this, but I'm willing to try with you. And maybe
Hmm.
we'll fail, maybe we'll do it well, but we're going to do it together. And I'm willing to try. I think that's really important. So, again, for leaders, you don't have to be the everything, you don't have to know everything. You also don't need to feel like you're an imposter. You can ask for help.
Yeah, I love that. And I know we have like a minute, but this is something that I also like want to make sure we emphasize. And you don't have to be the leader that makes a difference if you only have the role of the boss or the coach or the team captain. Like, you can be that leader, and you can make that difference in the people around you by noticing that there's people that are different, by noticing the minorities. One of the things that, for example, I keep trying to bring to Limitless is there's options. There's people that love routines, and there's people that like have, because in sports, like, routine is a big thing. And so, like, we were talking about neurodiversity and how people that have had mental disorders or have been diagnosed with ADHD also have a lot of feel this, like, the impostrum. I love how you said it, phenomenon. And
Yeah.
so part of it is like, how are we teaching different ways of doing things, of being successful, of studying? Like, how are we valuing different things? And so I think that's where we all can act as leaders and as agents of change.
I think we need another live around neurodiversity.
Oh yeah.
So it's a big subject, and I'm glad people are talking about it because it's just yet another way of belonging, right? So I
Mhm.
don't learn like someone else learns if I'm neurodiverse. And how do we make sure that everyone feels like they have the equipment and tools they need to succeed?
Mhm.
Very
Absolutely.
cool. I love meeting with you.
It's
so
mutual,
wonderful.
very mutual. So tomorrow, make sure that whoever is here is tuning in. I honestly forgot to check who was coming, so I'm gonna fail on that.
Oh, it's okay. But come tomorrow. Always, we're here Monday through Friday. We love you all in the Limitless community. Bye.
Oh, it's Colin
power.
and Joanna. Uy, power duo. So like, do not miss that. Thank you, Mari.
All right, everybody. Have a great week. Bye.